Places to earn a living, eventually to Emirates. He's, before I just finished with the club, he's been a member for 33 years, so he's an old hand. He's been with Emirates for 14 years and a training captain for 7 years. And today, I think you'll be very impressed with what he does for a living. A lot of us get into aircraft and travel overseas and just expect to be taken for a ride. There's a lot goes on up the front, and Graham will be telling you something about it today. Graham, over to you.
All right, thanks. Actually, there's not as much going up the front as you think there is. Okay, I'm just going to give you a little bit of talk. We will get on the polar ops in a little while. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview on the Boeing 777, its navigation systems and the cockpit ergonomics. Okay, Boeing 777-300ER. In Emirates we have 82 aircraft now, on the Boeing 777s that is, plus the A380s or the Airbus fleet, which doesn't concern me too much. Boeing now will only sell the Boeing the 777 with the GE90 engines. Our original aircraft, that's actually a picture of one of them there, has the Rolls-Royce engine on it. You can't buy the aircraft with the Rolls-Royce engine on it now, just in case any of you think you're doing that. The GE90, excellent engine, produces 115,000 pounds of thrust. Rolls-Royce have only ever managed to achieve 97,000 pounds of thrust, and we got up to a takeoff weight on the older aircraft with just under 300 tonnes. On the new aircraft, it's actually 351 tonnes with this new engine. 777-300ER, max takeoff weight 351 tonnes, has a maximum landing weight of 251 tonnes. If we do take off, like on the polar flights over to San Francisco and LA from Dubai, it's around about 15 hours. Sometimes we are up at maximum takeoff weight, and you can see to get rid of 100 tonnes of fuel, if you do have an engine failure after takeoff, we have to jettison that fuel. If we're jettisoning from the wings only, we can jettison at a rate of 1.5 tonne a minute. And if we jettison including the belly tank, which we normally are having fuel in the belly tank, we can jettison at 2.5 tonne per minute. So it's still going to take us, quite a long time, maybe 40 minutes to jettison fuel. It's quite a long time to be flying around on one engine. Should there be an engine problem, but unfortunately, we have to live with that. And generally, it's our company policy to jettison the fuel and come back and land below maximum landing weight. We had one of our aircraft last year had oil pressure problem out of Bangkok. Did a landing back into Bangkok at 306 tonnes. They landed okay, but blew all 12 tyres on landing. So as a result of that, we don't criticise the guys, they got out, that was fine. As it turned out, it probably would have been better if they had to jettison the fuel. And in fact, it wasn't a time critical scenario. Maximum zero fuel weight, 237 tonnes. The significance of that is that, at least in this aeroplane, when the dispatcher or low control fills the aeroplane up, you can fill it up to that weight, 237 tonne, and the rest is ours for fuel. With the max landing weight of 251 tonnes, it means that, at least for the pilots, we've always got 14 tonne of fuel on landing, which is, it's a lot of fuel, and it's nearly 2 hours fuel at holding rate. The original 777s only had a 6 tonne difference between max zero fuel and landing weight, and we always seem to be landing in places with no fuel. So at least now, we're actually feeling quite comfortable most of the time. The 300ER can fly the 15-hour sector quite comfortably with 1 or 2 hours reserve. The 200LR, which is our shorter 777, it's about 10 metres shorter, can actually fly 17 hours. In fact, up to 18 hours if they have to. During the recent volcanic ash incident, we had aeroplanes flying the long way around to the States. One crew did 22 hours duty time with a tech stop actually in Toronto for fuel. I think they did 15 hours to Toronto and then the rest across to San Francisco. Full tanks, 145 tonne of fuel. Depending on the temperature, can go down a little bit. If the fuel's hot, we might only be able to get 143 tonne in, but normally it's about 145 tonne at normal temperatures. There's 60 tonne in the wings and 85 tonne in the belly. Average burns about 8 tonnes per hour. 777-300ER is really quite a good replacement for the 747. It's burning about 25% less gas than the 747. The only problem being, of course, we've only got 2 engines, so when you are in remote locations like the North Pole, every now and again when we're sitting there, we just hope the engine doesn't fail. It's very similar in length and wingspan to the 747. The wheelbase of the 777 is actually 10 metres longer than the 747-400. A lot of places we park, they have markings for the 747-400, but they don't for the 777, so we have to be very careful. And there's some airports we go to, like Mauritius, super critical for turning. We have cameras, and I'll show you a picture of the camera in a minute, so we can keep an eye on the undercarriage, because we're sitting 35 metres ahead of the main undercarriage. It's quite a fair distance. There's 2 of our Kiwi pilots, we've never seen them since. That's standing in the old Rolls-Royce engine. The GE is actually about another 6 inches bigger though. I think that one's 10'2", the diameter on that engine. 2-class config, 442 passengers. We don't normally bring that aeroplane down to Perth, but for last week we have, just to try and clean up the backlog of passengers. And I think that's all done now, so everyone who needed to get away has got away. Normally we'd actually bring the 200LR down here, which only has 304 passengers. The 380 class, the 3-class config aircraft, we've got about 50 of those. They mainly run around Europe and also down Singapore, Melbourne. Crew can be 2 to 4 pilots, and normally about 16 cabin crew. On the ultra long haul, Perth, anything over 10 hours we have 1 extra pilot, so that's 3 pilots. Anything over about 15 hours we take 4 pilots, so it's two complete crews. Cruise speed normal is Mach 0.84. The aeroplane was designed to do Mach 0.84. Unfortunately, with the cost of fuel these days, the company wants to fly a bit slower, so we're normally doing Mach 0.82, 0.83 now. The only problem with that is, as I'll get onto when we get onto polar ops, is that the slower you go, the less heating across the wing, so you actually end up with flying slower with more fuel temperature problems. So personally, I know the aeroplane's going to not burn much extra gas at 0.84. At 0.84, we get a 30-degree temperature rise across the wing, and it's a good speed for the aeroplane actually, which has us out around about 500 knots. Maximum ceiling 43,100 feet. In my 5,000 hours in this aeroplane, I've only been there twice, up to 43,000. It doesn't operate that well up there unless you're very light. It sits best around 37,000 feet most of the time. 2 Rolls-Royce Trent 892s on the old aircraft, as I mentioned, but you can only buy it now with those GE90Bs, 115,000 pounder thrust. Very ergonomic cockpit, very easy to, very nice airplane to operate in. You can see there the captain's primary flight display, nav display, all nice big displays. All the previous generation of glass cockpit tended to have 2 screens, one on top of the other, which were quite small. These got big side-by-side screens, which makes it very easy to see. In the middle we've got our ICAS, which is the engine indicating central alerting system. We only normally have a couple of engine instruments displayed. If you wish to have more engine instruments displayed, you can display all these different panels up on here. Electronic checklist, and it tells us the status of the aeroplane, what's the seatbelts on, etc., which doors are open, and if there's been any failures. If we get any messages from air traffic control, altitudes, cleared, speed, or anything, they will normally pop up on here now. We have a data link system now, which is fantastic across the North Pole. HF is still used in some places. We don't have data link or SATCOM capability for the whole polar route, but for most of it we do. So we can just basically email them now. So it saves yelling into HF, as many of you would have experienced over the years. Multifunction display down the end here. We can basically display anything on this screen we want to. It's a standby screen. We normally just use it on the ground like that to see the status of the aeroplane, which doors are open. You can see there the rear cargo doors open. So at least you know when you're ready to go. It's just very handy for keeping situational awareness around the aeroplane. There's 2 flight management computers, one for the captain there, one for the first officer down here. The aeroplane has 2 GPS, has 3 inertial reference systems, and the FMCs also automatically update position to all those navigation tools en route. I'm sure for the ex-airline pilots here, remember when you did ATP nav, we all did grid navigation, and I remember doing that 30 years ago. I still don't understand it. But when we fly across the poles, we just hope the GPS doesn't fail. If both GPS did fail, we still have the 3 inertial reference systems, which would get us out of the polar region quite comfortably, probably with only about maybe 4 or 5 mile drift over a couple of hours. And if they fail, then we're back to the old grid nav, which is, I think we get lost. The other thing to mention with the 777, it is Boeing's first go at fly-by-wire. They've done a really good job. When I came off the Airbus 310 in 2001, half my class sort of went off to the Boeing, half went off to the Airbus, so we could compare courses as we went. The guys who went off to the 330 spent 4 days on the fly-by-wire system, talking all about control laws and things we've never even heard of. On the Boeing guy said to us, this is a fly-by-wire airplane. That's it. Finished. You don't need to know anything else about it. It's the same as any other airplane. It feels like, I've heard a lot of guys here, the F-28, it feels like an F-28 has that sort of built-in heaviness, or a Cessna 210 or something like that. It feels normal. There's no control laws to worry about. Everything is very, very normal on it. Easiest airplane to land that I've ever come across, that a few of my old training captains will be relieved about down there. And very good in the crosswind actually. We 40 knot crosswind limit. We practice in the simulator with 50 knot, big stable aeroplane. Just as a side there, everything in this airplane is pretty automatic, including all the systems. If you have any failures, particularly in electrics or hydraulics or the pneumatic system, the aeroplane will sense the failure. It will then attempt to isolate the failure and optimise the system. So normally you'll get a message up here on the screen telling you what the failure is. Generally we don't do anything for about a minute. Just sit on your hands, just wait. The aeroplane, in fact, if you want to, you can on this bottom screen, say if you've had some sort of bleed valve failure for the air system, you can bring up the air synoptic on that bottom multifunction display. The aeroplane opens and closes valves. It senses the best or most optimum scenario with the failure, and then it will present you with a checklist so that you can check that what the aeroplane has done is actually the correct checklist. Okay, and then we'll bring up the electronic checklist down here as well. Engine start, very, very simple affair. I can remember days in the F-28 as some of the captains sitting back here in Alice Springs where we had to taxi out on one engine and then go down the runway at 40 knots to get the other engine started. I don't know if that was a standard procedure, but anyway. This aeroplane, on the Rolls-Royce aircraft, we start both engines at the same time. Big engines, but the APU copes with it. On the GEs, a little bit bigger, we're only supposed to start one engine at a time. It actually can start both at a time, but I recommend we only start one engine at a time. They fire up very quickly. It's a totally automatic sequence. The GEs, it will attempt to start an engine 3 times. On the Rolls-Royce, the first engine start always used to be a hung start. The engine would get up to about 40%. For some reason, it wouldn't get up to self-sustaining, and it would stop there. It would be sensed by the system. It would take the fuel out of it. It runs the engine for 30 seconds with no fuel, just to cool the turbine down a bit, and then it will automatically restart the engine again when the EGT gets down below 100 degrees. For some reason on the Rolls-Royce, they very often did that. On the GEs, we never have any failures. It starts first time every time, and we've never had a problem with it. Yeah, like I said, to start the engines, the captain asks the first officer to start both engine starts, switches to on. The captain immediately selects both fuel switches to on, and if you're brave enough, you could actually go back and have a cup of coffee in the galley, but yeah, that's it. It's totally automatic, and they both start in about 1 minute, very, very quick, and they come up to temperature within about 1 minute as well, always by the time it takes out. Even in Europe, when it's minus temperatures, we have to get it up to a minimum oil temperature, 50 degrees, and it's there very, very quickly. Just for those who are not totally conversant, who's flown glass cockpit, the old turn and bank indicator has been replaced by that thing up there. It's called a trapezoid or trapezoid, depending on which school you went to. Basically, the same as turn and bank indicator. If the bottom bit there goes out to the left, you push the left rudder. If it goes out to the right, you push the right rudder. If you have an engine failure after takeoff, it'll go all the way out to the left. Just push as much rudder as you need to keep the thing together, and then you'll fly in a straight line. The aeroplane also has a thruster symmetry computer, which actually should work, and which will actually put the rudder in for you after takeoff. Our experience has been in a couple of engine failures that we've had when they've been due to bird strikes or a blade failure. Like the engine's had a real big bang. The thruster symmetry computer says it can't cope with it. It bugs out, and then it just leaves it to us to put the rudder in. So it is now a CAA requirement that we do all our sim checks with the thruster symmetry computer off. So we basically just fly the same as the F-28 or Barons. However, the system is there, and it should work most of the time. Vertical speed indicator on the right-hand side of the display. It's just indicating about 600 feet a minute down at the present time. Altimeter is a tape type presentation, very easy to read. Magnetic compass down the bottom there. When we get above 78 degrees north, we select this to true for the magnetic reliability. And we have a button on the glare shield. Just push the true button on that. It'll go to true, and then everything in the cockpit is referenced to true. Our air data computers will change all those compasses for us into degrees true. Nav display is pretty similar to any other glass cockpit aeroplane, really. That was just to give you a show. That's a holding pattern going into London. That's actually a Stansted Airport there. This is the land-borne hold. You can see there, 7,000 feet. We always enter that hold. Well, in fact, you always exit the hold at 7,000. Sometimes you might enter it at 20,000 feet. That's intermediate approach down to, you'll come back around for runway 09 left in Heathrow. For those that haven't seen the modern TCAS display, you see how the traffic here in the hold, this guy here is 1,300 feet below and descending. All aircraft now in European airspace should be displaying altitude. There's no one there, I think it says plus 1,600 feet. So he's 1,600 feet above, and it's not going up or down, so there's no arrow, he's steady. But actually it's a little bit alarming around a busy place like Heathrow. The whole screen's full of those. That's the just leaving the hold for intermediate approach in Heathrow. You can see the rest of the approach down there via the radial there, 007, down around to 11 DME London, turn left, and then the runway's just underneath here somewhere. And the rest of that is actually missed approach back to the holding pattern should you, sorry, there's the runway there. You can see these guys here, there's one there at minus 1,000 feet, another one there at minus 1,000 feet. They'll actually be departing. That'll be a standard instrument departure down to Dover, climbs up to 6,000 feet, normally steam down to Dover, and then you can climb after that. Also on the right hand of the nav display is a path indicator, tells you whether you're high or low on descent. This one at the present time says we're 2,774 feet low. We have to fly up to that diamond to get it back into the middle. It doesn't take into account more than one holding pattern, so we ignore that generally. We work out our own descent profile, same as we used to do on the old aeroplanes. So you always have to take this one with a grain of salt generally. 2 VOR displays there. VOR, that one's on London, you can see. VOR left there is on London as well. And the GPS is in green, which means it's GPS primary for navigation. When we're flying over the pole, we sit in mostly looking at that. Well, have a glance at it every now and again anyway. You can see the maximum speed there too, well in the hold should be max about 230 knots, ground speed about 254 knots, with a wind direction there, 18 southerly wind 18 knots that day in London. Okay, and just to confirm that you're actually flying a computer and not an aeroplane, we have a mouse pad. Same as you find on any laptop computer, it's known as the cursor control device. At the present time it only controls the electronic checklist. On the A380 now, they also use it on the navigation screen. You can click to any point on the nav display, select the nav display up to 640 miles, click on the nav display on the 380 and the aeroplane will fly directly to that point. Boeing are heading in that direction as well, but at the present time we only use it for the electronic checklist. As I said before, one of the main problems is actually taxiing the aeroplane. We have cameras up on the tail. There's one there, there's one on the left-hand horizontal stab, and there's also one underneath here. We're sitting 4 metres ahead of the nose wheel, 31 metres ahead of the main undercarriage. Need to make very wide turns when you're taxiing, and to assist us in that we have the this display which we can put on the nav display on the ground. The wheels here are 1.2 metres wide, so it's always a good indication. You sort of estimate how far you are from the side of the taxiway. Heathrow has actually very narrow taxiways. There's only about 3 metres to spare on each side over here. You need to keep a bit of an eye out in those places. The 747 you can see down ahead there is obviously the same aeroplane on the left and the right there, taken with the left and right cameras. No excuse for not taxiing on the centre line when you've got a camera to tell you exactly where it is. If you turn the thing on in flight, we're not trained to use it in flight. We don't use it in flight for any engine failure assessment or fire, etc. But maybe if you had to, you could use it. If we ever have a total electrical failure or a total hydraulic failure in the just behind the right-hand wing root there, embedded in the fuselage, is a ram air turbine. It's a propeller about the same size as a Cessna 182 propeller. That will automatically pop out, and the APU will also automatically start. This thing alone can power the electrics and the hydraulics by itself. So if we're in some remote place, like over the North Pole, this thing will pop out. The only things you'll see in the cockpit, if we're flying into volcanic ash and a dual engine failure, the first officer loses his flight instruments for about 2 minutes. The captain keeps his because he's on standby power. And after about 2 minutes, the flight DFO should get all his stuff back as well, and then we can attempt to restart the engines. I'll just brief on that. The rear 2 wheels here are steerable on the ground just to stop the big turning moment on the Olios. The A340 has a bit of a problem with that. They didn't have steerable turning, and they've ripped a few, or torn a few undercarriages actually on the A340. The 777 doesn't have that problem actually. Rotation rates, the aeroplane has a tail strike protection system. If we rotate very slowly on this aeroplane, on an engine failure only about 1.5 degrees per second, which is about half the normal rate, and the tail will hit at 11 degrees nose up. However, now with the tail strike protection system, it physically holds you at 11 degrees and won't let you rotate until you're above the ground, just to protect the tail a little bit. Just a brief look at the electronic checklist there. Anything the aeroplane can sense itself, it will automatically tick off green. Things that it can't sense or that have a choice of more than one thing, then we just go through and call out the checklist and tick them off ourselves. There's about 150 non-normal checklists in there as well. They pop up generally automatically. Anything that it can't sense, there's one up there called unenunciated checklist. Things like volcanic ash checklist will be in there. In fact, you can see the volcanic ash checklist down there. we'll select that ourselves. Okay, polar ops by definition are above 78 degrees north. We operate 2 flights a day, one flight to Los Angeles, 1 flight to San Francisco each day to go over the North Pole. And we also flights to New York and Houston. New York flight only goes up to about 70 degrees north, and Houston normally comes back down through the centre of Canada and the centre of the States and goes up to maybe about 80 degrees north maximum. It doesn't actually go over the pole. But the LA and San Francisco flights go over the pole every day. In fact, we generally fly pretty much in formation, 2,000 feet apart with those 2 flights. Above 78 degrees north, all operations have to be in true due to there being large areas of magnetic unreliability. And in fact, on our Jefferson charts, above Canada, there's everything, in fact, between North Canada and the magnetic pole. It says magnetic unreliability, so we stay in true for all those areas. At the present time, the geographic pole and the magnetic pole are 420 miles apart, and they're gradually getting back together again. In 50 years' time, they said it'll basically be on the other side, actually. I don't know why that is. Benefits of being true, that also the VLRs around the place are oriented to true, and ATCs will also give you headings in true. Generally, it's been my experience, so once you get past Russia, once you get past out here, then you're on your own after this. That's our 4 standard routes that we fly. It's from Dubai in the Middle East. You can see UK is down there somewhere. There's Spain down the bottom, France, and Iceland, Greenland, and then coming basically overhead. Toronto is down here, I think. New York's down here, and Los Angeles and San Francisco over there. Although there's 4 standard routes, Russia are very strict. They won't let us fly off airway. But once we get out of the Russian airspace, normally up just past Dixon up here in Russia, once we get outside Russian airspace and into Arctic control, we can actually use the random routing up there, and we can fly off airway. In fact, normally we'll get direct tracking from one of these points direct over to the Canadian FIR, sometimes 2,000 miles in a straight line, which saves a bit of time. If we stay on the airway, then it goes there. You see, it's just a few degrees off the pole, but normally if you get direct route, you go just about exactly over the North Pole on that route. The other route we use is this southerly route. We tend to use this one more coming in the opposite direction and try and pick up a bit of a tailwind on the way back. It's not often we use that northbound. On the aeroplane, we have 207 minutes approval on one engine. That came about, we used to have 180 minutes to fly on one engine approval, which means there always had to be a suitable landing point within 3 hours. Then the FAA actually approved an extra 15%, and that's how we came up with 207 minutes. We've only just managed to do this in winter. As a result of that, sometimes the ETOPS rules, we actually end up flying a little bit further south, because basically there's really nothing to the north, apart from Dixon and then Fairbanks up there in Canada. Everything else is really to the left, and you're looking at Tula Air Base here, down in Greenland, Sonderstrom, maybe Reykjavik, but obviously with the volcano at the present time, that one's out. Churchill is up there as well, which is also available. This place, Dixon, it's only got a 2,300 metre runway. It's absolute emergency only. There's also an intriguing note in our manual that says that above 78 degrees north, we're not to align our IRS on the ground, or not to align the IRS. So we're always intrigued that if we do have a diversion somewhere here, how we're ever going to depart again, because we can't actually align the compass. It's a secondary problem after you've landed. Some of the other problems up there, if you do a diversion, of course, cold weather after landing, whether the APU could cope with temperatures of minus 50 degrees on the ground and keep the passengers warm, we're not actually sure. Russia also uses QFE instead of QNH, so anywhere you descend to in Russia, you've always got to add the airport elevation onto, otherwise you're likely to crash into terrain or mountains around there. It's a bit of a trap. GPS is, like I said, always primary navigation, and it's always accurate except when there's solar flares. But the lack of accuracy during solar flares hasn't been very much in our experience so far. I mean, maybe it's a couple of miles. It's, over a 7,000 or 8,000 mile flight, it's nothing that's significant actually. And normally once we pop out the other side into Canada, the system updates itself with ground stations anyway, so it takes out that error. Communications, like I said, mostly data link. Satcom is okay for most operations. There is some place up here where Satcom's not available. HF is generally okay as well for most stuff. Well, while we're on GPS is available over the poles. There is 24 GPS satellites that circle the Earth. They're moving the whole time. They're not geostationary. They circle at an altitude of about 22,000 kilometres. and they circle on planes up to 55 degrees north and 55 degrees south. But even at 55 degrees, which is down here somewhere, sitting out there in space at 22,000 kilometres, you're still getting good, strong signals. And we've always got a minimum of 4 GPS satellites that we can interrogate, even directly over the pole. In fact, most of the time we've got 6, so it's not actually a big issue. Radiation is an issue for the crews. You're allowed to have, by convention, or occupational health and safety, I guess, 20 millisieverts max per annum. I have no idea what that means. If there's any nurses or doctors here, someone could probably tell us. I don't know what one X-ray must be less than one millisievert. Does anyone know what one X-ray? I don't know what one X-ray is. Look, our guys are doing about 20 polar crossings a year, and we're not. No one's having an issue with it. So the company monitor it. If there's solar flares, we actually plan further south to try and stay away from those areas of radiation. That cartoon actually came out of the Daily Mail after BA38. The British Airways flight had ice in the fuel after flying from China to BA. Their engines didn't actually flame out. They had ice in the line, and they ran at idle, but they couldn't get above idle. And at 500 feet, there was no further power available. And I'm sure you've seen the result of that, where they splashed down into the grass about 300 or 400 metres short of the runway in Heathrow. We had the captain of that flight down in Dubai a little while ago, and one comment he made, he said that after they landed, sitting in the cockpit, the purser came in and said to them, "Is it catastrophic?" And he said that they were probably both in shock, because the captain looked at the first officer and said, he said to the first officer, "Is it catastrophic?" And the FO went, "I guess so." So the captain said to the purser, "It's catastrophic." So she went back and did the emergency evacuation on the aeroplane. The captain said then, and he said the biggest fire engine he's ever seen in his world, ever in his life, was sitting out in front of the aeroplane. And it was the biggest fire engine because they ripped the undercarriage off during the landing in the grass. Of course, the aeroplane sitting on its belly on the runway, so the fire engine's filling up the window there completely. As Peter has said, the jet air won't freeze at minus 47 degrees. We actually, Boeing recommend to stay 3 degrees above it. We actually stay 4 degrees above it, because in America some places only give you jet A, and there's a chance we might still have some jet A in the tanks. So we operate at minus 43 degrees. Fuel normally cools at a rate of about 3 degrees per hour in ISA conditions, but it can be down to 12 degrees. As Peter said, if it gets down to minus 70, you're in pretty hostile conditions actually. And although we get a 30 degree temperature rise across the wing at Mach 184, that's all very well across the wing, but we've got belly fuel as well, and the belly fuel will actually possibly cool at a greater rate than the wing fuel. As Peter, in fact, we're not supposed to dispatch, in fact, our dispatch are not supposed to plan us for more than 90 minutes flight time below minus 65 degrees Celsius. The forecasts are fairly accurate, and so far I haven't heard of anyone complaining that they've had temperatures below that for that time. And that works out at ISA minus 8 at 36,000 feet. And like Peter said too, if you increase speed, it's very, very slow. A Mach 0.01 increase, it gives about a 0.5 to a 0.7 degree total air temperature increase. So it's going to take a long, long time to bring that fuel temperature back up again. And in most cases, you're probably better to go down at least 8,000 feet. If we're cruising 37, we're probably going to go back down to maybe 28, 29,000. In fact, some guys have said they've had to go down to 25,000 feet to get any appreciable temperature change. And also, as Peter said, above 36,000 feet, it is supposed to be isothermal up to minus 56, but in our experience, it can go down to minus 70. That's about all on polar ops. Any questions on polar ops?
Interested in you as an individual. If I understand it, you work as a training officer.
No, I work as a training captain out of Dubai. In
So
Dubai, we have 4 777 simulators in Dubai.
are you one of the only training officers, or do you have them in every centre?
No, we're all based in Dubai. Like Cathay, we have no external bases for crews. I think that's coming because our fleet's getting big enough now. We've got over 150 aeroplanes now. It's getting big enough that we're probably going to have to base people elsewhere around the world in sometime in the near future.
And is it possible to get you to comment on the difference between the 777 or your liking for the as opposed to the 340 or the 320, 330?
I'm seriously Boeing biased, so it's probably sorry. Yeah, look, the Airbus. I think the Airbus built a good aeroplane. It's a totally different philosophy to Boeing. The things I don't like on the Airbus is that they have a flight envelope protection system that basically the aeroplane won't let you fly outside that flight envelope protection system, or at least on the Boeing. When you put in more than 35 degrees of bank, it becomes quite heavy. If you let it go, it will actually spring back to less than 35 degrees. But on the Boeing, if you want to fly outside the flight envelope, you can. I can't think of many reasons when you would want to, but maybe mid-air collision imminent mid-air collision, there might be a time to do that. So for that reason, I really like the Boeing much better, and it's actually much you feel like as a captain you're much more in control of that aeroplane. So it's quite good. Actually, just there was 2 more slides. I'm just going to show you very briefly just on that volcanic ash. Before we go, we've got time for 2 more minutes.
Yeah.
These charts. This was from last Saturday. This was the second day after we started flying, after the volcanic ash. The volcanic ash by this stage had actually cleared reasonably well in Europe. There's England there and all the rest of Europe down here. This actually circle here shows the volcanic ash around Iceland from the surface up to 20,000 feet. And there was actually another patch on the next map I'll show you. But I've given these out to all the crews as soon as we started flying. You can see here, this is the main ash cloud with a tail there drifting down to the southwest from Reykjavik or Keflavik up to 20,000 feet. On that one, this is on the 24th at 0600 Zulu. And the cloud there in Europe, it's sort of all the rest of Europe had pretty much cleared up, but there was a high concentration still there up there north of Hungary, and sort of getting over towards Poland and just southern Scandinavia, still covering a fairly large area. I thought it was quite interesting that 6 hours later, at 1200 Zulu last Saturday, it actually shrunk quite dramatically. This concentrated area of ash still only showing up there and drifting away sort of past Poland. Another 6 hours later, at 1800 Zulu, it's basically completely disappeared, and then there's just the ash cloud remaining around Iceland there. And then on the 25th at midnight, it was basically showing the same just the ash around Iceland there. It's starting to drift back in that direction a little bit, but Europe was completely clear. I flew to Munich 3 or 4 days ago. Cab okay, 25 degrees. You can see about 300 miles. I saw no sign of any volcanic ash whatsoever. So it's a mystery. It's a mystery to me, but I think they knew what they were doing. All right, thanks very much.
Just one question. Excuse me. Going back to this language problem, I can understand the Russian problem. I went to play at the Irish Club last week and I couldn't understand half what the Irishman was saying.
Yeah.
And you talk about God knows how many different nationalities fly.
Yeah, look,
how do you go to the cockpit yourself?
Everyone uses standard phraseology. Look, the hardest place for me is actually Bangkok. I find the Thais just about impossible. And I've got clearances from Bangkok to Hong Kong. I think they said this. So just take off and hope for the best, and think we'll argue with someone when we get over Vietnam.
Does religion ever come into it?
Yeah, we pray a lot. No, not really. No, look, we have Muslim pilots, and I fly with Cadet, and he says they pray 5 times a day. They take their prayer mat, they'll normally go out to the galley, they'll say their prayer for 2 minutes, and they're back again, and it's not an issue actually.
How long do they take to become a first officer?
It's a 1.5 years in Adelaide to get their commercial pilot's licence and a frozen ATP. We bring them back to Dubai, they do a jet conversion, first of all 50 hours in the simulator on the A310, and then we stream them off to either 777 or the Airbus. The conversion course takes about 9 months. 6 months for the conversion, and then they're with the training captain for 12 months. They do minimum 120 sectors with the training captain. We normally release them to line with about 700 hours total. Command is 6,000 hours, so they're doing 700 hours a year. I mean, you're looking at 8-9 years at least for those guys to get a command. So normally by the time we get them as captains, we're quite confident in their abilities, and we put them through quite an intensive command course. Most of them make it. They're actually quite good.
Big last one. We fly the 146 and we're presented with level flight is 2.5 degrees nose up.
Yeah.
Appeared on your PFD that you are getting actual pitch attitude rather than
No. The flyby, everything in the 777 is actually just an illusion.
Yeah.
It shows you what you want to see basically. So it adjusts everything so that it always looks like it's on the horizon. It takes a while. In fact, it takes you a little while before you realise what the fly-by-wire does. On all aeroplanes, when you select first degree of flap, you always get that ballooning. On the 777, nothing happens. You're flying along straight level, you select the flap, it all just sits there rock solid. Obviously, the fly-by-wire is looking after it. It's adjusting the horizontal stab in the elevator as required. So it's a very, very easy aeroplane to fly. Yeah, sure. Why not? Yeah, we need 450 more pilots next year, another 200 this year. All right, excellent. All right, thank you very much. Hope it wasn't too boring for you.